Some singers perform a song, others become it. Mick Jagger did something far rarer. He made one song the defining proof that he was unlike anyone who had ever stood at a microphone before him. The setup. There is a question that follows every great band eventually, a question that separates the merely successful from the genuinely legendary. That question is, who would this be without the person standing at the front? For some bands, the answer is uncomfortable. Remove the frontman, and the music survives, maybe even thrives. The songs are strong enough to carry themselves. But for the Rolling Stones, that question has only ever had one answer. Without Mick Jagger, there is no Rolling Stones. Not because Keith Richards is not a genius, not because the band is not filled with extraordinary musicians, but because what Mick Jagger brings to that stage is something that cannot be replicated, replaced, or even fully described in words that do it justice. The Rolling Stones arrived in the early 1960s as part of the same British invasion that gave the world the Beatles. But where the Beatles were melodic, charming, and broadly lovable, the Stones were something else entirely. They were dangerous. They carried an edge that felt genuinely threatening to parents and genuinely exciting to everyone under the age of 20. Their music was rooted in American blues, raw and physical, and charged with a sexual energy that mainstream pop radio had never quite encountered in that form before. And at the center of all of that danger, all of that energy, all of that barely contained wildness was Mick Jagger. He was not the most conventionally gifted vocalist of his generation. He would be the first to admit that. Robert Plant had more raw power. Roger Daltrey had more controlled technique. But Mick Jagger had something that neither of them possessed in quite the same way. He had a presence, the kind of presence that makes an entire stadium feel like he is performing specifically for the person standing furthest from the stage. The kind of presence that makes a camera feel like it was invented specifically to point at him. And one song above all others became the ultimate proof of that presence. The moment where everything he was crystallized into something permanent and undeniable. Who Mick already was. Mick Jagger was born in Dartford, Kent, in 1943, which meant he grew up in post-war England. A country still rebuilding itself physically and psychologically from the devastation of the Second World War. That context matters more than it might initially seem. The England of Mick's childhood was gray, rationed, and deeply conservative. A society built on deference and propriety that left very little room for individual expression of any kind. What American rhythm and blues represented to a young man growing up in that environment was not just music, it was liberation. It was the sound of people expressing things that English society insisted should remain unexpressed. He discovered that music through a chance encounter with Keith Richards on a train platform in 1961, where they recognized each other's record collections and struck up a conversation that would eventually change the history of rock and roll. What they shared was not just a taste in music, but a deep hunger for something that their culture was not offering them. They wanted rawness. They wanted honesty.
I see my red door, I must have it into black.
They wanted the kind of emotional directness that Little Richard and Muddy Waters and Chuck Berry were delivering, and that nobody in England was even attempting. Jagger threw himself into studying those influences with an almost academic intensity. He watched how those performers moved, how they used their bodies as instruments, how they controlled a room not just through their voices, but through every gesture, every pause, every deliberately provocative moment of eye contact with the audience. He absorbed all of it.
Like a newborn baby, it just happens every day.
And then did something that only truly original artists ever managed to do. He synthesized it into something that was entirely his own. The strut, the lips, the hip movement, the sneering charisma that somehow managed to be simultaneously threatening and irresistible, none of it was copied from anyone. It was built from influences, but it belonged only to him. The song. Sympathy for the Devil was born in 1968, and its origins say everything about what made Mick Jagger different from his contemporaries. The idea came from a book, specifically from The Master and Margarita, a Russian novel by Mikhail Bulgakov, in which the devil arrives in Soviet Moscow and proceeds to expose the hypocrisy and moral emptiness of the society around him. Jagger had been reading it, as he read widely and voraciously throughout his career, and something about the central conceit seized his imagination, the idea of writing a song from the devil's perspective.
Traffic for troubadours who can't kill before they reach Bombay.
Not as a horror story, but as a philosophical provocation, as an invitation to examine human history through the eyes of its darkest witness. He brought the idea to Keith Richards, and what followed was one of the most creatively productive collaborations of their entire partnership. Richards built the musical foundation, that rolling somber rhythm driven by percussion and acoustic guitar that immediately suggested something ancient and ritualistic rather than conventionally rock. The choice of rhythm was deliberate and brilliant. It gave the song a ceremonial quality, as if what was happening was not a performance, but an in. Jagger's lyrics drew from history with a breadth and confidence that was genuinely startling for a rock song in 1968.
And all the sinners saints, as ancestors you call.
The Russian Revolution, the crucifixion of Jesus, the assassination of the Kennedys, the Blitzkrieg of World War II, all of it filtered through the voice of a narrator who claimed to have been present at every one of these moments, cheerfully taking partial credit for each. It was sophisticated, literary, and intellectually provocative in a way that most rock lyrics of the era simply were not attempting. Subscribe and ring the bell. More amazing videos are coming your way. The performance. To understand what Mick Jagger did with Sympathy for the Devil, you have to see it, rather than simply hear it, because the recorded version, extraordinary as it is, only captures half of what makes the song legendary.
Stuck around St. Petersburg when I saw it was time for a change.
The other half lives in the performances, and no performance captures it more completely than the footage from the Rolling Stones' Rock and Roll Circus, filmed in December 1968, but not officially released for decades afterward. In that footage, Jagger appears wearing a striped ringmaster's coat, his face painted, his body in constant fluid motion from the moment the first percussion hit lands. What he does over the following 6 minutes is not dancing in any conventional sense of the word. It is something more primal than that, a physical embodiment of the song's central character that uses every inch of his body to communicate things the lyrics are only hinting at. The hips, the hands, the eyes, the mouth. Everything is deployed with a precision that looks completely spontaneous, but is clearly the product of a performer who has thought deeply about every single moment. What makes it genuinely remarkable is the control underneath the apparent abandon. Jagger never loses the thread of the vocal, no matter how extreme his physical movements become. He can spin, crouch, prowl the stage like something feral, and then land back on the microphone with perfect timing and perfect pitch every single time. That combination of physical freedom and technical discipline is extraordinarily rare, and it is what separates great performers from truly unforgettable ones. The Gimme Shelter documentary from 1970 captured another dimension of the song's power, this time in the context of the Altamont concert, where the performance took on a weight and a darkness that nobody in that field could have anticipated. Watching Jagger perform Sympathy for the Devil in that footage, knowing what was unfolding in the crowd around him, is one of the most genuinely unsettling experiences in the history of rock documentation. The song had taken on a life completely beyond his control, and somehow that only made it more powerful. The controversy. No conversation about Sympathy for the Devil is complete without confronting the darkness that followed it. The song arrived in 1968, one of the most violent and traumatic years in modern American history. Martin Luther King had been assassinated. Robert Kennedy had been assassinated. The Vietnam War was escalating with no end in sight. Cities were burning. The world felt genuinely unstable in a way that made a song narrated by the devil feel less like provocative art and more like an uncomfortable mirror held up to reality. Then came Altamont, In December 1969, the Rolling Stones headlined a free concert at the Altamont Speedway in California that was intended as a West Coast answer to Woodstock. Instead, it became one of the darkest days in rock history. The Hells Angels, hired as security, became increasingly violent throughout the day. During the Stones set, a young man named Meredith Hunter was stabbed and killed in the crowd. Sympathy for the Devil was playing when the violence began, a fact that the media seized upon immediately and that attached itself to the song permanently. Jagger was visibly shaken during that performance, stopping the song midway as the disturbances in the crowd became impossible to ignore. The footage of him standing at that microphone, confused and frightened and trying to maintain some kind of control over a situation that had spiraled completely beyond anyone's ability to manage, is one of the most humanizing moments in his entire career. For once, the persona cracked, and underneath it was a young man who had no idea what to do next. The controversy followed the song for decades. Some radio stations refused to play it. Religious groups campaigned against it. It became the go-to reference point for anyone who wanted to argue that rock music was morally dangerous. And yet, none of that. If anything, the controversy deepened the song's power, giving it a weight and a history that most rock songs never accumulate, no matter how long they survive. What it revealed. What Sympathy for the Devil ultimately revealed about Mick Jagger was something that his earlier work had suggested, but never quite confirmed so completely. He was not simply a rock singer with good instincts and magnetic stage presence. He was a genuine artist with a specific and sophisticated vision of what rock music could be and what it could say about the world. The song demonstrated an intellectual ambition that his public persona, all swagger and provocation, had always somewhat obscured. It revealed that he was a performer capable of complete transformation, of disappearing so thoroughly into a character that the line between Mick Jagger and the devil he was portraying became genuinely difficult to locate. That capacity for transformation is what separates performers from actors and actors from artists. Very few rock frontmen of his generation possessed it to anything like the same degree. David Bowie, perhaps, Jim Morrison, in his better moments. But the list is genuinely short. It also revealed the unique creative dynamic between Jagger and Richards that would sustain the Stones for decades. Richards provided the musical architecture, the riffs and rhythms that gave Jagger's performances their physical foundation. Jagger provided the intellectual and theatrical content that elevated those riffs into something culturally significant. Neither was complete without the other, and Sympathy for the Devil is the purest expression of that complementary genius working at its absolute peak. Perhaps most importantly, it revealed that rock music was capable of engaging with ideas at the highest level, of drawing from literature and history and philosophy without losing any of its visceral physical power. Jagger proved that you did not have to choose between being smart and being dangerous. You could be both simultaneously, and the combination was far more powerful than either quality alone. That lesson echoed through rock music for decades afterward and can still be heard in the work of artists who have never consciously thought about where it came from. The legacy. Decades after its release, Sympathy for the Devil remains one of the most covered, referenced, and debated songs in the history of rock music. It has been recorded by artists ranging from Guns N' Roses to Jane's Addiction to the Neptunes, each interpretation revealing something different about what the original contains. That capacity to sustain multiple valid interpretations across multiple genres and generations is the clearest possible indicator of a song's true depth and staying power. The Rolling Stones themselves have never stopped playing it. It appears in almost every setlist they have assembled across more than 5 decades of touring, which is itself a remarkable statement. Most bands retire their oldest material eventually, finding it impossible to perform with genuine conviction after so many repetitions. The Stones have never seemed to face that problem with this song. Every performance suggests that Jagger finds something new in it, some fresh angle or emotional register that keeps it alive rather than merely preserved. The influence on subsequent generations of performers has been immeasurable and largely unspoken, which is often how the deepest influences work. The artists who learned from what Jagger did with that song rarely cite it directly, because what they absorbed was not a technique or a style, but an entire philosophy of performance. The idea that a rock frontman could be intelligent and dangerous simultaneously. That physical charisma and intellectual substance were not in competition, but could reinforce each other into something genuinely irreplaceable. Mick Jagger never just sang a song. He made every song a statement, a challenge, and a performance that demanded your complete attention. If this story reminded you why he remains irreplaceable, hit like, subscribe, and tell us your favorite Stones moment below.